There are two words I want to focus on for this episode: happenstance and what I'll call awakened humanitarianism. The first, happenstance, is defined as coincidence, by accident, by chance, serendipity, fate, destiny, fortuity, fortune, providence, occasionally freak or hazard, but mostly a piece of good fortune. You get the picture. John Crumboltz developed the happenstance theory to show how positive or negative events can be the foundation of indecision or a stepping stone to something greater. He suggests that every opportunity or chance encounter that may happen to an individual over the course of any given day offers some type of benefit. The future can be predicted to some extent, but there are times when we can also make our own luck. This is the core of the happenstance theory. Chance events, unpredictable social factors, or predictable environmental factors can all have a unique influence on an individual. These experiences may be positive or sometimes negative, and are most often taken advantage of when someone has the following characteristics: curiosity to explore learning opportunities, a persistent attitude to deal with roadblocks and obstacles, flexibility to address circumstances, problems, or successes, and a focus on positive energy so that optimism becomes the foundation of choice. Crumboltz suggests that when an individual can focus on these four personality traits and develop them over time, then they will have the ability to capitalize on chance events which occur to them. Coincidence becomes opportunity. Now let me share the other word I want to focus on for this episode: awakened humanitarianism. I'm defining this as a person who discovers that they are compelled to promote human welfare and social reform, a true aroused philanthropist. You'll soon learn how these two words intersect on today's episode. Welcome to Small and Gutsy, our podcast featuring nonprofits and social impact organizations under $10 million. My name is Dr. Laura Witkoff, and I'm excited and proud to be your host. We hope you'll love the stories as much as we do, and perhaps you will find needed services, a job, volunteer, invest in, or donate. Please pass along any valuable information you hear today to others, and send me the name of any organization you'd like featured at lwitkoff@gmail.com. That's 2 T's and 2 F's. One could argue that my guest today, Zane Busby, whom you already know as a well-known actress, Americathon, Up in Smoke, and other films, a television comedy director and a producer, has always had a knack for capitalizing on the quirky, funny side of the human experience. But what you may not know is that her interest in the human experience, part of her DNA, had a meeting with fate, and that's where awakened humanitarianism and happenstance collided for a journey that you will hear about in a few minutes. The happenstance of her traveling to Eastern Europe, specifically Belarus and Lithuania, to discover and learn about her familial roots gave way to her life of humanitarianism for the last 14 years. That happenstance laid open the opportunity to create the Survivor Mitzvah Project, which brings emergency aid to the last survivors of the Holocaust in Eastern Europe. They are in desperate need of food, medicine, heat, and shelter. They live in countries that deny vaccines to the elderly and forbid them from leaving their homes. Therefore, food, medicine, and care must be delivered directly to them. The Survivor Mitzvah Project's goal is that no Holocaust survivor who has experienced the darkest days of human history will ever be cold, hungry, or neglected again. 100% of every dollar donated for survivors goes directly into the hands of a Holocaust survivor in need. And let me just take a moment and share with you that is incredibly unusual. I work with a lot of nonprofits, interview many of them, as you know, and it's very rare, almost unheard of, that 100% of every dollar donated goes directly into the hands of a survivor. As Zane shares, we cannot do anything about the past, but we are in the position to write a more hopeful final chapter to the Holocaust, one of friendship, kindness, and love. I am so excited to introduce my guest, Executive Director, among the many other hats she has worn and continues to wear, Zane Busby. Welcome, Zane. Please share this experience of your awakening to this particular cause and what keeps you going with this project over 14 years.
Well, it's been longer than 14 years. I went on my first trip over there, my roots trip, in 2001. We became a nonprofit, 14 years ago.
Yeah, thank you.
But I was directing comedy. I was at Paramount or something, and I usually, after a big, long year of directing, I usually go to Hawaii. So I was like making my Hawaii, reservations, and I got a call from my mother who said she just read something that there's going to be this like return of Jewish people to Lithuania, and it's being hosted by that country for the first time after the war, and there's going to be films and this and that, and maybe this would be a good time to go and kind of try to find your great-grandmother's birthplace and all that stuff. So I thought, okay, why don't you come with me? She says, no, you go and you tell me about it. And when I got to Lithuania, I realized that I should have had a visa to get into Belarus because it was still like a blocked country. Mm-hmm. So I had 4 days in Lithuania that I didn't plan on to kind of like, poke around before I went across the border into Belarus. And that was just like the happiest accident in the world because I met a whole bunch of people. But I met one person who said, hey, if you're going to cross the border, there's some Holocaust survivors in Belarus, in the tiny little villages, just where you're going to be and on the back roads. Yeah. And if you wouldn't mind, would you bring, some food, and would you bring something? And if you wouldn't mind, would you bring some money, some American dollars? So I loaded up on stuff and I crossed the border, and it was literally like going back in time. I mean, everything looked like the war had happened yesterday. Bullet holes in all the buildings. I mean, it looked like something like a set at a Fiddler on the Roof, little leaning, wooden houses that were partially destroyed. And I'm going, wow, this is like unbelievable. I as a visual artist, I mean, that just took over from me. And I'm looking at this stuff, and then we started to like look for these people because I had this short list. And we found this little town, and we found the hut because they live in these little wooden huts that were built like 200 years ago. And I knocked on the door, and there was no one there, and actually had a padlock on the front. And I thought, well, maybe I'm too late. But then I went around back. There was an elderly person on their hands and knees digging up their potatoes from the ground because if they didn't, the ground was going to freeze and they wouldn't have a winter food supply. And I didn't know the languages, so I had a translator, but someone told me, just say Shalom Aleichem so they're not scared of you, because they never had really a good experience with, shall we say, strangers knocking on their door. So I would go, Shalom Aleichem, they'd turn around and they'd run over and hug me and kiss me like I was a long-lost cousin, and then we'd go inside, they'd make tea, and I'd ask my translator, what happened to you? And they were like, well, we never talked before. We weren't allowed to talk, or we'll get in trouble if we talk. But they started to tell their stories, and I was like, whoa. And I said, do you get any help here? And they were, no. And, we applied for help like 15 years ago, blah, blah, blah. But, we're the last, Jewish person in this village.
They were forgotten.
So I gave all the money that I had carried with me away. And then I thought when I came back that this was a no-brainer. I would just get online, pull up the, Google the big Jewish charities like the Federation and the Joint and everything like that. I'd give this list of people to them because obviously they must be doing this, and I would then donate to those charities. Well, it turns out, the Federation is not doing this, and the Joint only does it to the extent where they get paid through the Claims Commission, which is the money coming from Germany. So then I kept looking and doing research and calling places and saying, well, you have this on your website. We help Holocaust survivors. Like, what's the program? Well, we don't really have a program. So everyone's like kind of making money and getting donations on the backs of these poor survivors in Eastern Europe, and they're not getting anything. So that just like irked me. And I thought, this needs some, someone to take this on, and I was so busy and everything, but I also knew I'm the type of person that could take it on because I can organize this and I could move mountains. So I thought, I'm just going to start. I would, just take these envelopes that I made up, draw a heart and a star, and wrap up some $20 bills and send it off. And I didn't know whether they knew who I was. It didn't really matter, but someone would appreciate it, I thought. 2 months later, I started getting these little notes back on a little
wow.
I still have them, little torn piece of paper.
Beautiful.
Like something like, your envelope was like a ray of sunshine in the darkness. You don't even know me. How can you be sending me this? I cried when I opened the envelope. So then this same person who had given me the initial list is a linguist. So he goes all over Eastern Europe and, Ukraine and places and the Baltics. And, he's looking for that town where he studies Yiddish, the vowel may go from an to an and he's happy, So, but what he did is along the way he found elderly people because Jewish schools during the Holocaust were stopped. So anyone who could actually read and write Yiddish was much older, born in maybe 1910, 1905, 1917, And then he would email me, I just found 38 people in Ukraine who really need help. Put them on the list. And I'm thinking, what list?
What list?
So anyways, I put him on the list, And then he would go into the, Lithuania, I just found 47 people, put him on the list. And this list started to grow. I mean, from 8 people to 100 people to 200 to 300. And meanwhile, I'm just doing it out of my pocket. And I thought, this is insane. There's so many people to help, and then someone said you should become a 501c3. So we became a nonprofit. And then I was able to get a translator and say to these people, what happened to you?
So it started your awakening, so to speak. And I really felt those characteristics of someone who is open to this defines you in so many ways because it's an incredible story. So that happened much earlier, and it wasn't until 14 plus years ago that you really created a more formalized organization in order to help more people.
We started to get 15-page letters, all handwritten, things that I never imagined, places I've never heard of, experiences I had no idea about. And this was oh my God. And then in the letter on the sign-off was always something, I wish we could meet. I know you don't know me. You're writing to a total stranger, but I feel your presence. And then someone wrote, I would give my life to meet you. I made a database, so I started to look at their birth dates, and some of them were born. And I said, if I don't go now, they're not gonna be here. So I went back, and on that trip, that was again Lithuania, Belarus, and then I went to Ukraine, and then I went to Latvia, and then I went back to Lithuania, and then I went back to Belarus.
How many times have you gone back since that first trip?
I used to, before the pandemic and everything, try to go at least once a year. My last trip, because the pandemic hit, was 2018, 2019, which was Transnistria and Moldova. And I plan to go back to Ukraine. And now, they're saying to me, don't go to Ukraine because there's going to be a war. And, so who knows? I mean, we had to change everything during the pandemic and use all of our boots on the ground and people who live there, and they're wonderful, wonderful people. And, they're very brave, and they cross borders with lots of money, and they do things for us, and they never ask for any money. And there are some wonderful people on this earth,
Yeah, it's incredible. It's almost like you've created, to a certain extent, an underground for good. Sort of what people do, people certainly did during the Holocaust. I'm sure many of these folks survived that way. You're resurging it in a positive way to help them really have a life that is, at least for them, had meaning because you're bringing it to light in so many ways. It must be so powerful for them as well as for you.
Every single one of them, let's face it, was saved in some way because someone did a kind act, a stranger, someone they don't even know. For 5 seconds, someone didn't report them, someone threw them an apple. One little thing. They are humanitarians, every single one of them. I'll give you a perfect example. There was a woman who lived out in a small town, Ivankov, right, in Ukraine. And she was very cheerful and always wrote me, I put your picture by my desk and I talked to you out loud. And she was just very cute. And she didn't seem to be as wanting as some of the other people. So at that time, when I was giving them $400, I would give her $350 so I could give someone else some money. And then I went there. And when I got there to her place, I was like, oh my God, this was the poorest person I ever saw. I mean, literally there was snow on her bed. I mean, she had holes in the ceiling and she had no windows and it was freezing cold. And I tried to give her a sweater that I had brought, and she said, give it to someone who needs it. I'm not naked. My translator tells me she wants to know if she can split the money because we gave her $800, probably more money than she ever saw in her life in one time. I said, split it. Then I'm thinking, is someone going to steal this money from her? What's going on? She says, well, there's a woman down the road who's worse off than her. I said, tell her, no, she can keep the money, come with us, introduce us to this woman, and we'll help her too. And she was worse off. Her hut had burned down, and she was just living in cardboard boxes. And so she got on our list. So that's how the list grows, you know.
What you've done is you've built community, whether these folks all know each other or not, by the creation of the Survivor Mitzvah Project. You really have created a community so much bigger than the folks who it's directly helping, but the folks on this side of the ocean who want to help and support, as well as folks who are really risking their safety.
You know, kids, you know, when they have a bar bat mitzvah, they're supposed to do a mitzvah project, and a lot of them do animals, and they do wonderful things, but they do things that there's a lot of money being thrown at. So we want them to, like, do the Survivor Mitzvah Project where they can, like, literally save the life of the survivor. And every kid who's done this, right, said it changed their life forever. You can change a life just by being nice, which is like incredible. Nice is free, you know. People go on these trips, like my cameraman or whoever come with me. We don't really take other people because there's no room. I always tell them at the beginning, okay, for the next 3 weeks, you're going to be on the mitzvah train, which means you're helpful, you're in a good mood, nothing negative, you know, always help people, always be kind, and you'll see what happens, you know. Eastern Europe and the Baltics are what, you know, the Survivor Mitzvah Project is about. So what you're saying about it's all been forgotten, yes, because all the museums, and you know, from the biggest museums there are, right, they focus on Auschwitz, and they focus on seeing the Holocaust through the lens of Auschwitz. So you'd think the Holocaust happened in Poland. Almost no mention of almost half of the 6 million, 2.7 million people were murdered outside of the concentration camps. You know, subject to the mass killings, subject to the town burning, subject to the hanging. I mean, so many different stories, but they're not even mentioned. And part of it is because museums need artifacts to do exhibits. And there's lots of artifacts from Auschwitz, right? As we always say, the piles of shoes and the eyeglasses and the diaries and whatnot. And in Ukraine and those places, you know, the killing squads would come into a town, kill every Jewish man, woman, and child, right? Then torch the town or torch the Jewish section of the town. It's not a photograph, not a diary, so there's no artifact. But what we've done is we started filming them. So we have now the biggest collection of stories from the East, right? The Holocaust in the East is what they call it. Some people call it the Holocaust by bullets, because a French priest named Father Patrick Dubois, he's been on 60 Minutes and everything. He wrote a really groundbreaking book called Holocaust by Bullets, where he, you know, forensically proved that all these killings, these mass killings happened. And so we have, because the only thing left to tell the story of that part of the Holocaust, half of our dead are the people themselves. And that's who we have, the people telling their stories, you know. I'm trying to raise funds. We need, you know, it's $1 million project, all of these videos, and get them out, because they need to be out there so people can click on them and watch and learn, because otherwise we're just telling half the story of the Holocaust.
Walk me through the program itself and how people might get involved.
Well, first they should go on the website, which is Survivor Mitzvah, mitzvah.org. And if they just scroll down the homepage, there are videos to click on, and it's the entire story of what we do is right there. It's a beautiful website. A wonderful person who's a big web designer, and she called me up and she said, I want to donate my time and build you a spectacular. She's fantastic. Her name is Pamela Dean, Westside Video in New York. And so it's a great website, because it'll tell you that 75% of Holocaust survivors don't have enough food. It'll give you all the statistics, and it'll show you these 3 and 2 minute films, so you can actually see the survivors and see us help them and know what we do. So it's, you know, just spend your time at survivormitzvah.org and donate.
And so when someone donates, you either, if you can't get over there physically, they do get the money directly from you.
We have distribution lists, and they know exactly where to go and who to give it to. And then if you donate, you get the name and the place of the survivor you're helping.
You know, any donation is not too small. I think that's the takeaway for me. Nothing is too small. And that your goal is to really create end of life in a positive way for all of these survivors. They've survived up to this point, and showing them kindness allows them to leave this earth with a feeling of there is humanity still here.
The thing is, you can change a life with a simple act of kindness. It's so, so true. It's true for those people who were helped like 75 years ago, and it's true today. Like, all you have to do is be kind to people. You know, no one's going to miss like $1 a day or $3 a day. No one's going to miss it. You don't have a Starbucks or whatever and give it to somebody, because we figured out that to bring food, medicine, heat, shelter to one survivor is about $150 a month.
It's beautiful. And you know, these individuals, as so many who perished, were invisible, purposely invisible. And so you're creating a visibility for them that it will not have been in vain.
That's exactly. I'll tell you one short story. So there's this woman in Tulchin, which is in Ukraine, right? One day her whole family and all the Jewish people in the towns and villages nearby, they're marched to this place called Pechora, which is a concentration camp. Ever hear of it?
No, honestly, and I know pretty much about the Holocaust, frankly.
You know, now I know a lot about Pechora, but you can't find it in a book or online. There's very little about it. So she goes there. She's about, 4 or 5 years old. She has an older brother and a mother and a father. They go, and the minute they get there, they realize, oh my God, there's no food here. This is a starvation camp, which it was, right? That's, the Holocaust in the East. They died by starvation, intentional starvation, whatever it was. So the father says, I'm going to escape, go back to our house. I'm going to sell our tablecloths and our silver and everything, and I'm going to bring back bread. So he goes and he does it, and he brings back 5 loaves of bread. And the minute he comes back, they shoot him dead, and they take the bread. So now it's the mother and the 2 kids, right? The mother, like all mothers, anything that they could scrounge, any blade of grass to eat, she gave it to the kids. So she dies of starvation. So now it's like her and her older brother. He starts to go a little bit crazy because, he's just so petrified. And so the whole camp is now just kids practically, because right? And so the soldiers are saying, Go get us water, and then as they cross into the, where the water is, they start using him as target practice, right?
Oh, Lord. Yeah.
And then they were supposed to get injected with typhus because they did experiments there, and then the next day the camp was liberated. Her brother couldn't go with, they immediately put him at the front. He went into the army because he was 17, right? So she's alone now, she's 9 years old. So she doesn't know what to do, so she starts walking along this village road back to her town. And she's so hungry. So she starts to smell bread baking, and she's like, thinks she's hallucinating, and she goes and she follows it, and she goes to this farmhouse, and she can tell they're baking like sweet buns or something. She knocks on the door, and the woman comes out, and she says, I'm just so hungry. If I could please have like a bun. And the woman says, go back. My husband will give you something. Well, of course, she had knocked on the wrong door because this was the head gendarme, Nazi, the whole thing. So he beats her with an axe, with the back of an axe, She can't walk. It took her 1.5 years to learn how to walk again, right? This guy, right, and his wife, he becomes the mayor of the town. So she can never, ever tell the story, So she never tells the story until I walk in and say, hey, what happened to you? She never told the story to anybody.
She was terrified. It's amazing that she even survived. She
became a nurse, and she became the nurse to like 5 of her friends who were also her age in the camp. And they all, after the war, they all took care of each other. She still takes care of some of them.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. But what a story that could never have been told. I can't even imagine not only the trauma, but the depth of, I don't even know what you call it, to keep something, an experience so deep because of there's no choice. You don't have a choice. Either you survive by going completely dead, kind of shutting that part of yourself off in order to do that. So you have opened up.
Right, and they change. Their faces change. You go there and you see like a husband and wife maybe. We don't have too many couples left, but and you see like they're old and they're worn and they're sad and whatever. And after just like maybe 5 minutes of talking, they become like 20 years younger. They finally realize, oh my God, someone reached out to me. And then I always tell them, you never have to worry again. We got you. We're not letting go. One woman, I mean, there are so many quotes, there's 1,000 quotes, but one woman wrote a great one. She says, like, There I was. I had nothing, and I had recently had like cancer surgery, and I needed bandages, and I didn't know what to do, and I didn't have any medicine, any food. And there was a knock at my door, and a woman was there with bags of bandages and dressings and this and money. She said, "I thought things like this only happened in fairy tales."
I mean, it's just incredible. You must, I don't know if you can go back to that first experience of how you felt internally when this occurred. You know, those early experiences of where you physically saw this in front of you, where someone opened up and that connection to you and that warmth. Can you describe that?
It was as if I was related to these people. They treated me as if I was their granddaughter, you know? It was just like I felt like I had known them. My grandparents, you know, who came to this country in like 1910, you know, they had like Yiddish accents and they sounded like these people. You know what I mean? It was not that these people spoke English. They didn't.
The intonation.
Yeah, I just realized, you know, it was every one of them was just like, oh my God, you know, it was like being able to talk to a soldier from the Civil War or something. You know what I mean? This was living history, and I was getting to like hear it for the first time. Extraordinary.
Yeah, and connecting to a piece of your own history that had powerful meaning that you wouldn't have otherwise been exposed to.
My great-grandmother, who I went there to find more about her, okay, she, there was no grave, there was no nothing, there was no town left, there was no, okay. So, but my grandmother, who I knew actually, one of my father's mother, was from a town called Evenetz. All of her brothers and sisters stayed in Eastern Europe except one. So like 2 were killed at Auschwitz, 1 joined the Russian army, and 1 was taken to Siberia, you know, was expelled from like, and that's the one who survived, her 5 children. After the war, they went to Israel. So I contacted a cousin, the oldest one in Israel, and he said, okay, if you go to Evenetz, find the town well, okay? I said, okay. He says, like, stand in front of it, and then look to your right, and you'll see a house with a red door, like, you know, like that.
Like it would still be there. Okay.
And there it was. That woman's name is Sonia, and she remembers me and my brothers. We used to play with her, so knock on that door. So we get there at like 10 o'clock at night, and I'm like, I don't know. Anyway, so I see the thing, I knock on the door, and after a moment of confusion, like, who are you? You know, oh my God, you know, so she invites us in, and I have pictures of them, and she tells us stories about them. And she says, you know, they always used to come to my house to have like a pork sausage.
That's great, because they weren't allowed to eat that at home.
So she says, meet me tomorrow in the town square, and I'll show you everything that happened. I said, okay. So I meet her the next day, and she's showing me the wells and the this and that, and there's like these townspeople, women who are listening, and they're very strange looking, right? But, you know, and one woman's walking somewhere, and she says, I was telling her about the Russians are talking, you know, my guide and this woman, and they must have said something about that time. And she says, she comes over, and of course she's speaking Russian. She says, I saw everything with my own eyes. So we grabbed her into it. So she says, I was 14 years old. I had my cow. I was going to bring the cows home. It was like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I hear a rat-tat-tat-tat, rat-tat-tat-tat-tat, this rhythmic thing in 5s, right? She says, what the hell is this? So she climbs up the hill, and she looks over, and she sees they have all the Jewish people in the town, and they're lining them up at this pit and just mowing them down every 5, and then the next group. So she was like transfixed, and she watched this, and then she came home. Oh, and then a kid walks by in the middle of filming, right? So she takes the kid by the arm, and she says, they took these kids, and boom, she kicks them, like she says, right down the well. All the babies and the children, they threw down the wells, which they still use. I mean, how insane is that?
Insane.
So she said she went back to her father, you know, and mother, and she said, oh my God, you know, they said, why are you so late? And they were mad at her, and she said, this is what I saw. And her father beat her and said, never tell anyone.
Never talk about it.
Because they'll come and they'll kill us. So that was the first time the woman told. I didn't plan on filming it, so I'm going, could you hear them screaming? I mean, I'm like, I'm out of my mind at that point, because I'm hearing what happened to my family, you know?
And the degree of complacency of others because they feared their own lives. But what you said before, which I think is so remarkable, as these individuals don't seem bitter. They seem grateful that you've connected with them, and they want to tell their story. My mom is a Holocaust survivor, but was very young and Austrian. So I went back to Austria on a scholarship to live, had a wonderful experience to a certain extent, because I wanted to go back and understand the history of my family, right? They were gone, either killed or, emigrated. But I'll never forget this one experience of going into a deli. I was teaching in a school, going into a deli. My German wasn't that good, but it was good enough. And there was an exchange, and it was in a small town. There was an exchange between the deli owner and a customer. And he was saying something like, the time of Hitler was such a great time. We didn't ever have to lock our doors. We never had to worry. And truthfully, if so many Jews were killed, or all the Jews were killed, how come there's so many walking around? I thought, I am not purchasing anything from this guy, and I got to get the heck out of here. But and then, all the stuff going on in our own country. It's so scary to think about the level of hatred that exists. And what I'm so struck by with your project and with what you're doing is they have no patience or room for hate. And if anyone has a right to hate and be bitter, they do. Not only because they're what they experienced, but after the war, there was no ability to get any way to have a better life.
And also, there's a couple of Swedish books and Danish books about the psychiatry and the psychology of it. They were interviewed, and then after they told their stories, some of them once, right, like in 1946 or something.
Yeah.
Relief workers and they were told that they were lying because it couldn't have been like that.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, horrible. And there's still a movement that believes that. So let's get to your film project, because I love it. Not only are you doing an incredible mitzvah, good deed, wonderful thing for people who don't know what that word is. We should put it in our English vocabulary. It's a great deed. You are also creating their legacy so that, in fact, we will remember. It's not that we don't forget, we will remember. And I'd love to hear about that.
I run the whole project like I run a sitcom or a film. I do. We have production meetings and this and that. It just keeps me on course, So we had it budgeted out, like what it would be to do 300 interviews, and we already have them shot, and we need to edit everything, and we need translations, and we need subtitles, or else no one's going to see it, because every museum wants the original materials, but it's going to go in an archival situation, in a box, and no one will ever see it. So my thing is, that's okay for the original materials eventually, but to just do what we have on a very no frills budget, because there's so much material, is $4.7 million, which is a lot. Wow. But then it's not a lot compared to a project of this size. You know what I mean?
Right.
So maybe we could whittle it down a little bit, but that's basically what it is. So we need the person or persons. I don't think it's going to be an organization, but there's plenty of millionaires and billionaires who could, if they just want to do the Lithuanian thing, that's like $1 million. And if they want to do like the Ukrainian side of it, or if they want to do the whole thing, there's plenty of money. We just have to get to the right people. And that's what I need help with. More than anything. And I want to do it now because, I still got my wits about me, and I can do it now. I can do it in 2 years. It's a 2-year project, and I can get it out there. But if we can't get the funding for it, it's going to be sad, because it's going to end up in a box in some museum. And maybe in 40 years, a graduate student will get access to the archives and the stacks, and he'll trip over this box, and he'll open the lid, and he'll find these weird-looking square things and go, what's this? Because it's a little hard drive, and the technology is not there anymore.
It doesn't exist anymore.
Right, so that's what's going to happen to all this stuff that everyone's collecting like crazy. There's so many archives and so many, that's not it. We need, especially now, when there's so much hatred in this world. Holocaust education is using old black and white newsreel footage that I saw as a child, of naked people in Auschwitz, and that's what kids know. And you know what? They're not interested. They're not interested. But if they see someone vibrant and in color, and you're going through the snow with them, and they take you to the forest, and they take you to a partisan bunker where they were 17, that's a whole different experience. It humanizes these people. So that's what you have to do. You have to humanize the people, so that like one kid said to me, I showed him a bunch of. He was 12 years old. I spoke at some school. And he says to me afterwards, oh, I get it. It's like Anne Frank. And I'm thinking, not really. But, okay, how is it like Anne Frank? And he said, because if Anne Frank had survived, wouldn't we want to take care of her?
Oh, I'm so proud of him. Yes.
We even developed, and we have it, but it's a $300,000 project, but we had the whole thing developed, but not, is a learning app. Even at the Showa Center and places where students can look and do this and do that, the minute they're out of class, it's over. The minute it's out of class, they're on their phone. So we thought, this has to be on their phone. So on their phone, they can go on a trip with me to Eastern Europe. They can go with a classmate. A teacher could split them up into groups. They can collect badges from different places. There are quizzes along the way before you get to the next one. And it's using a thing called gamification as a learning.
Sure, I know it well.
And what's interesting about that is it can be used for any subject once it's created. So if someone wanted to invest in that, they could use it to teach sports or women's rights or the black experience or, voting rights or famous Americans. You can use it to teach anything because it's the same thing. You just replace the content.
In my doctoral work, I was working with smaller nonprofits on their marketing, actually, and messaging, and used Edward Deming's work on continuous improvement, but replaced the doing with a gamified idea, whether it low tech or high tech. And so it follows that same premise of how do you get feedback is it has to be an exchange, and how do you test something out, but test it out quickly. And so it's the same kind of idea is you're trying to figure out a way is how can we integrate this learning in a fun, interesting way that piques curiosity. If I hear this correctly, people can go on, they can donate, they'll get a sense of who the money goes to directly, which is great. They can follow along, they can watch amazing videos that you've already have on your website. You're looking for donor or donors for the film legacy piece that really is a documentary that is engaging and becomes a permanent part of history that we can relive whenever we want to. And then the other thing I'm hearing is this application of an app on the phone for learning, for curriculum learning for students.
Right, because when I first started the project, I knew there might come a day when we would be seeing close to the last survivors. We're not yet. So our Mitzvah project was created. It was created with these two missions. Of course, first and foremost, while there's a survivor, is to get them emergency aid. We don't take any money that anyone gives us and do education with it. That's not what we're about. Then people would have to say, I would like this to go as a Holocaust education. If we can get all these stories out to every museum, because I want it to be all over the place. I mean, the story should be in the Holocaust Museum, plenty of places overseas where people don't know what happened in the Holocaust because it's not taught. In Lithuania, no courses didn't happen here, yet they killed, 95% of the Jews in the country before the Germans got there, but they don't teach it. They have a Museum of Genocide. It's called the Museum of Genocide in Vilnius, Lithuania. Guess what's missing?
You can't be serious.
Any mention of the Holocaust is not in there. Here's another crazy one. So I met an educator in Ukraine. This is at least 10 years ago. And she said that because of global warming, whatever it is, because in Ukraine, literally, if you're in the boondocks, you can't walk 10 feet without tripping over a mass grave. There are so many more people than we know than this 6 million number. Towns know where it happened, and you'll find an old person and they'll go follow the river and go over here and go in the forest, and that's where it is. So every once in a while, like from the mass killings, like a skull, with rains will roll into the main square of these little villages, and some kid will pick it up and it's got a bullet hole in the back, and they'll take it to home, right? And they'll go, Mom, Dad, what's this?
Look what I found.
Parents turn green, right? Or they'll take it to school for show and tell, right? So this got to be so prevalent that the government started telling the educators, and this woman that I met with was an educator. She said, so you know what we have to teach now? I said, no, what? She says, we have to teach that the mass graves all over the place, right, are full of Ukrainian citizens that the Jews killed in the Holocaust. That's yes,
I don't believe this.
Yeah, so it's screaming for us to get these.
There's no question. The rewriting of history is disgusting. Yeah, is so disgusting. And it's like populations, including the non-Jews, have been silenced. So as much as they might want to share something, they're being told, including this educator, you can't.
I mean, we have a misconception that after the war, everyone was sorry when they saw it. It's not, none of that is true. Because for them, the war, like this guy said to you, was a wonderful time. They had the women had husbands who were dashing and handsome and wore fabulous uniforms. They went to the opera. They had art. They had jewelry. They had all the stuff taken from the Jews. They had wonderful dishes, and you know what I mean. They had all. This was a great time. They were raising their children. I had one survivor who said, people come to Lithuania all the time from Germany, right? She said no one has ever, and she would always like take people, and she says, I never had one person say, I'm so sorry for what happened to you.
It's amazing. And of course, I'm sure there are some citizens who do have, but the overarching feeling is what I experienced too.
Is that we're sorry we didn't win the war. That's what we're sorry about. There's some wonderful books like that. Frauen is one about the German women. They're not sorry about that. They're sorry that they couldn't continue and that their lives were blown apart after the war. So although Germany has the best Holocaust education, and the best laws regarding, crimes of hatred, a lot of countries like Ukraine and Lithuania and Latvia, they haven't owned up to it.
Not only not owned up, but they're still in a phase, it feels to me like full denial, which is just horrifying. And so again, your project, getting back to your project, speaks to the fact that you are creating such visibility, not only for the individuals to be taken care of, but that their lives mattered in this way. And that's why getting that film completed is vitally important, along with taking care of these individuals so that they have a good rest of their lives.
They were like you and me. They had dreams and hopes. They had senses of humor. Some wanted to be ballerinas and some wanted, just like anyone else. And then this happened, this horrible thing that we can't even imagine. The absolute bravery of people who helped. Their families, from the babe in arms to their oldest son, would all be hung if they had given like a piece of bread to a Jewish person. I mean, that's the risk that they took, and they helped anyway. It always makes me think about good and evil and what makes it, because you'll go to a tiny little village, right, where, it's like in the boondocks, and maybe it's got 8 of those huts, and there's no Jewish people there, but there were, And so in hut 1, the mother and father hid like a little Jewish girl up in the attic. In hut 2 was the head of the Nazi police, who took part in the mass killings. In hut 3, they had like 2 Jewish boys under the floorboards, and and the rest of them were all killers, right? So how does that happen? Because it was the same education or lack of education, the same parish, the same everything. And yet some were good and some were evil. And so you ask them and they go, we did it because it was the right thing to do. There are so many stories of Jewish women who went to, in the boondocks to hide with a peasant family, and they almost got found out because they were helping in the kitchen or something until like neighbors came, then they would hide because they cut carrots a certain way, like on the diagonal. What, do you have a Jew hiding here? And the people would freeze and they go, no, I once worked for some Jewish people. Would you do it if someone said everyone who had blonde hair was now an enemy of the state, and if you talk to them, you would be executed along with your family? And then 2 seconds later, knock, 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 in the middle of the night, a young girl with a baby, and she's got blonde hair.
Says,
and
please help me.
And what do you do? That's the question. What do you do?
Yeah. We each have our own moral compass, and I don't know where, it comes from a whole host of places, but I think about this a lot. I sometimes think, would I have survived back then? Because look what it took to survive. And if I had been in a position to help, would I have? You only hope if you're in a situation like that. And then you have to ask yourself the question, so what am I doing now to support kindness and to reduce hatred in general, whether it's Jew, a person of color, the whole Asian feel with COVID. All of this stuff that's occurred as a result of pure hate.
Yeah, it's the Goebbels playbook that we're living through right now. So it's not so, I know it happened almost 80 years ago, but this is happening right now. And we've got to stop it. We're all in it together.
And that's why I want to make a plug that the film that you're putting together is instructive for all of us, whether you're a Jew, a person of color, or if you've ever been in a position to other somebody else. This film has to be told because it brings a sense of empathy and a sense of reality, how wrong it is to not remember what this kind of mentality can do to destroy humanity. And that includes all of us.
And that's why these interviews with these survivors are so important. We have a couple of finished ones. The Holocaust Museum in Washington asked me to cut together just a few what it might look like. So we did 3, and they're on our website under Holocaust Educational Archive. And there's a woman from Moldova who has a great piece. There's an old couple. They're so funny. They love each other so much. They were together for 70-something years. I mean, and that was like done like with a little camcorder and no cameraman, and
I've watched a few, and I love them.
The woman who was from Moldova, she was 90. She's 100 now. She just had a birthday. She was 18 then, and she was on one of these, taken to this horrible place called Kodima. You ever hear of it? No. From which no one returned. Right. So she has this incredible story that she takes us through. And then at the end, she talks a little bit about like modern day Moldova. And she said, my children, because of me, are Jewish. She says, and I feel so bad for them because no one likes this. When the people in my building found out I was Jewish, they stopped talking to me.
And this is today. This is current.
She just sighs and looks down, and that's the end of the interview. But she was like, she's like the most amazing, fabulous, sweet, kind, wonderful woman. And they don't talk to her because she happens to be other,
I also loved, and I did get a chance to see this, the stage production you did, reading letters. Actors stood up and actually were in the voice of the individuals you went and met and received letters from. And I was so moved by that.
If you didn't cry, we didn't do our job.
I don't want to admit that. No, of course I did. How could you not?
Ed Asner and Valerie Harper and Lady Dan and Elliot Gould. And that's on the site, too. So you can just click onto the last survivors. But that was like that's a really funny story. A woman called me up after I had spoken somewhere, and I could tell she was really old, and she kind of sounded like Gilda Radner. I thought maybe someone's doing a joke. And she says, I went into my laundry room in my building, and there were all these pamphlets from your organization. And I thought, she's going to yell at me now. I can't take it. I really can't. And she says, where the hell is Steven Spielberg? Where's Barbara Streisand? Why are these people? I'm getting in my car. I'm 91 years old, and I'm going to drive to the Holocaust Museum. I said, okay. Later, I get a call. Come from the director of the museum. Leave a gift. Come. You have our space. Do an event. Tell the story.
That demonstrates to me that anyone can do something.
Absolutely, anyone can do something.
Take opportunity that comes your way. When the door opens, walk through it.
Oh, absolutely. And you have to
You did, this 91-year-old woman did, and look what happened as a result.
My sister always calls me the intrepid because I'm, thank God, not fear-based. I know a lot of people are, and I feel bad, but I'm not. I'm like, oh, wow, what's next? I'm very curious, and I'm not afraid of, I'm afraid of spiders and things like that, but I'm not afraid of experiences.
Yeah, you're the epitome of those 4 characteristics that I talked about in the beginning of the show. You really are, and you're demonstrating that then, now, and in the future. And so I'm really hoping that you find donors who can do both of those and continue to have donors who donate any amount, because any amount goes directly, which is, by the way, for listeners, is highly unusual for an organization. So I really want to point that out. This episode is sponsored by the Intrinsic Group, my boutique management consulting firm specializing in guiding organizations to leverage talent, optimize processes, and to ensure the organization's narrative is aligned with their culture. If you'd like to sponsor an episode, please reach out to us. To see all the small but mighty organizations we featured, check out our incredible infographics in the stories section of the Intrinsic Group website. So you may or may not know, but at the end of my podcast, I always do a round of quick, gutsy questions. They're fun, and you'll have fun with them, I hope. And this is a little bit unfair because we've talked so much about donor and funding, but what is at the top of your wish list for the Survivor Mitzvah project? However, the answer can't be donor, money, funding. What would be at the top of your wish list?
To get the stories of the Holocaust of the East out and into the lexicon of Holocaust history, because it's not there.
Yeah, to really make it known, because it's hard to believe that it's unknown, but it is. If you were to think of a song that describes the Survivor Mitzvah project, what would it be?
Oh, there's one song that's great, but it's a song that's over there all the time. Dark as the Night. It's the greatest song, and that's the song that everyone in the war sang, like I heard it once. I went, what's that song? What's that song? And my guide sings it. And then the guide and the driver sang it in harmony. Then all the survivors sing it, so we used an instrumentation version underneath some of the films that we do. And what it is, it's a guy in a foxhole, basically, right? It's Russian, and he's in a foxhole and he's wondering about the woman he left behind who has the baby. It's just like, so, it's a tearjerker song.
Share with me, and I think you've shared a lot about this, but I want to give another opportunity. What makes the Survivor Mitzvah Project gutsy? Because it's gutsy.
I think the fact that it's a very, it's like the little engine that could. It's a small, it's very dedicated people. No one's making, money on this, and we're doing the right thing. That's what makes it gutsy. And we don't have to wait. If I find out that some woman in, some little town somewhere needs, she's going to have her leg amputated unless we do something and get her the right medications, I can get that money to her the next day. I don't have to wait 6 months for an allocation and then a committee and then a 27 member board to meet. We can get it to her the next day. So we're very, very nimble and very mobile. And that's what I want. I want to be able to help them. I don't want to be able to find all these horrible stories and not be able to do anything.
Yeah, you've really reduced any obstacle for direct help in the most immediate way. It's incredible.
That's one of my big beefs with the claims, if I may speak freely, with the Claims Commission, which is Jewish material claims against Germany. And it was started in right after the war, right?
Yeah.
And they get funneled all the hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars a year from Germany because they're self-proclaimed they're the place. I mean, but the survivors don't get a lot. Some of them get, they do very well. But if you were in a concentration camp, it's easier to get money because you have the card and you have the thing. But they'll ask a survivor, so where were your parents buried? The survivor will say, they were in a ditch somewhere. You think, I know? You know what I mean? Or where are your papers? They were burned, So I built this whole database with the help of some wonderful people. Sonia Kovitz is one, Dr. Kovitz. And it had every survivor there, it still does. We use it all the time. It has their name and their address and their phone number, so they're reachable, right? So I gave all this information to the claims conference saying, help these people. That's what you're supposed to be doing. Oh, well, we would have to, vet them. I said, they've been vetted. Here's all the information on them. Oh, but we would have to, find out where they live. I'm giving you where they live. 3 months would pass, and I would call. So what about that guy we were going to help? He must have moved because his phone didn't answer. I said, well, just a second. I would dial it right then and say, he's on the phone right now.
I know,
in other words, what I realized, they do what they do, and they don't want to know about the rest of it. So, okay, I'm not going to waste my time. I can't change them. They've been doing it for 70 years. God bless them, right? But if I want to help these people, I got to do it my own way.
Right. And that's what makes you gutsy. You have to find a workaround, and you have. What is something that outsiders, or maybe even a few insiders, don't know about the Survivor Mitzvah Project?
That it exists, because we don't have a budget to publicize things. So we always ask people, what can you do? You can donate, of course, but what can you do? You can send the website to different people and say, it's something from my own heart. And please look at it, click around on it. And if you think, as I do, that it's worthwhile, donate, but send it along.
If you, and this is a little unfair question for you because of your history in the entertainment world, but if you could get one celebrity or influencer to endorse or talk about the Survivor Mitzvah Project, who might that be?
Probably Kim Kardashian or one of the Kardashians. I mean, do they have the biggest, someone who's got the biggest amount of followers? I actually tried to get to her once because, there's a whole Armenian genocide. We did a talk maybe at MOT or something like that at the museum. Their publicist never responded to the idea. I thought that would be wonderful.
I think it would be wonderful. And MOT, for listeners, is the Museum of Tolerance. It's a wonderful museum. I think that's a great idea. I think you keep, like that 91-year-old woman who got in her car and went to the museum, right? You're going to, I hope, and we'll do our part at Small and Gutsy, but I hope that you just keep knocking on those doors. I'm just delighted that I got a chance to connect with you and talk to you about it.
I had a really great time talking to you. You asked great questions.
It was just wonderful and fun. And before we close, I know you've said it before, but I want to do another. What is the best way for folks to check you out, learn about the Survivor Mitzvah Project?
Go online. Go online to www.survivormitzvah.org. And if you screw it up and go to survivormitzvah.com, you'll still get to our website.
Ooh, I love it. That's great.
Go down the first page. You'll see all kinds of information. You can click on these short videos and see us in action. They were all done overseas in these crazy, you'll see me climbing through the snow. And then if you go further into the website, you'll see some of the full-length videos we've done of these survivors and places. Call us, 800-905-6160. A lot of times I answer the phone, or, Layla, who's sitting right here, answers the phone, and Hi, Layla.
Hi, Layla. Hi, you reached out to me, and that was great. Thank you. I just think this is, I think it's a great opportunity. And for those listening, if you're connected to an organization, a school, a corporation, corporate social responsibility, this is a perfect opportunity. Donate at any level. If you happen to have a few extra $1 million sitting around and you want to make a donation for this production, this documentary, it would do the world good.
Yeah, I'll leave you with this thought. We have so many commemorations where we honor those who perished. We honor the 6 million, as we should. But what about those that survived? What about their family members? What about the sisters and the children and the nieces and nephews of those people? They have nowhere to turn. So to truly honor the ones who perished, let's help those who survived.
Thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, please share it with your friends, give us some stars, and write a review on wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're interested in sponsoring a small and gutsy episode to keep it going, please reach out to me or buy us a coffee at www.buymeacoffee.com/small-and-gutsy. Just an FYI, for those of you who might want to be a small and gutsy patron, we just released our Patreon site with some really fun first edition small and gutsy merchandise. So check us out to support this effort at patreon.com/small-and-gutsy. Of course, we can't take responsibility outside of our own vetting of the organizations we interview, meaning we encourage you to do your own due diligence and research them as well. I want to thank my partners in this endeavor, the Intrinsic Group, the volunteers, my co-producer, sound engineer, and composer, the amazing Pavel Franson, my social media maven, Delania Tirado, my infographic creator extraordinaire, Sonia Fizek, Nate Addy for the exceptional logo, and all the friends and family who have guided and inspired me. A very special thank you to my biggest champion, without whom I could not have created this project, my very best friend and a true sounding board. Thanks, Mark Witkoff. Thanks for being there. From small and gutsy to big with impact, I'm Laura Witkoff, and thanks for listening.